This presentation is about ideology in film studies and, more importantly, the term that comes up year after year, and that is ideological critical approach. Ideology appears as a specialist study area in two sections of component 1. So in section B, you apply it to Inception and Captain Fantastic along with spectatorship. And in section B on component 1, it appears alongside narrative for Shaun of the Dead and This Is England. Now, the simplest way to consider ideology is either in a political or feminist sense, and that can be either explicit or implicitly shown in the films that you have studied. Now, a key exam phrase is ideological critical approach, and essentially what that means is you can watch a film and enjoy it on a surface level, but when you then apply political and or feminist ideology to a film, what new meaning is being created? Does it help you understand the narrative more? And does it explain elements of spectatorship? Now, a key word here is hegemony, and simplified is explained as the dominant or hegemonic ideas in societies. So, for example, in the UK, the hegemonic sport is football, religion is Christianity, and sexuality is heterosexual. The ruling or dominant ideology in a political or social context, so the ideas around marriage, education, and other societal norms. Ideology reveals that a film reinforces, challenges, or rejects dominant beliefs and attitudes within a society. So when you apply political ideology to your films, it's a good thing to bear in mind which political party was in power at the time the film was produced and when the film was set. So they're two slightly different things. What elements of the film are considered to be left or right-wing, also known as liberal or conservative, and you need to know the elements of those, whether the film is set in America or the UK. And does the director challenge or reinforce the political ideology? And again, is their ideology explicitly shown or implicitly shown? So you have to really kind of analyze it. And it's not so obvious. When applying feminist ideology to each one of those films, how are females generally represented within the narrative? Are they active or are they passive? Are they seen to be doing things, or are they just bystanders? Are they objectified for the male audience, so you can bring in Mulvey there? Are they sexualized? Are they femme fatales? Are they nurturers, caregivers, or housewives? So some stereotypical representations there. Are they pivotal to the story, or are they just tokenistic? Do they have a purpose beyond being linked to a key male protagonist? So there's a Bechdel test. If you Google that, you can see there's certain rules that a film has to pass for them to be considered quite balanced when it comes to representation. Representation is achieved through cinematography, sound, editing, mise-en-scène, and performance. And how are the females in the narrative presented to us through SCEMP? So it's worth looking at their costume, their behaviors, whether there are any sounds attached to them, how much screen time they get, so that comes under editing, and so on. So yeah, that's feminist ideology. So this is taken from the Ideology Knowledge Organizer that you can find online. So Eduqas Ideology Knowledge Organizer. How are these ideas visualized? Is it through location? Is it through a certain social group? Use of color, so that's color correction. Is it a certain prop, or is it by a particular character or characters? Now, for every film study, you should consider the narrative resolution, almost, at the end of the day type scenario. How does each film end, and who or what has won? What is the director trying to tell you about the world, and what is the message? What is the film really about? What is the big idea about how the world should be? What is the final message of the film? Who wins the battle of the ideologies? What debates and social discourse is the director prompting? What character voices the point of view of the director? What views does the antagonist hold, and who do they represent? Does the director ask you to question your own beliefs? And does the film exist in a world that replicates our own? Or does it offer a better or worse alternative? So a quick overview of all the film study. When you apply political ideology, capitalism is evident in Inception throughout, and ultimately capitalism wins. And again, it reinforces a patriarchal or right-wing ideology that Cobb, the father of the family, just makes it home. So no one else really matters at the end of Inception, as long as Cobb gets home. and essentially capitalism wins. When you apply feminist ideology, you've got your main characters that they're Mal and Ariadne. Mal being a femme fatale, but ultimately a projection of the central male protagonist. She's shown to be vulnerable as well at some point, but she is ultimately not real. She's fictional within the narrative also. Ariadne is always non-sexualized, but is she almost tokenistic? Again, at the end, she is kind of sidelined. Her story, it doesn't really matter. She gets involved and then it's just kind of sidelined towards the end. There are only 2 females in a largely male cast. We hear his mother-in-law on the phone, we never see her, and the other female is the one that Eames kind of pretends to be in the bar in order to snare Fisher. But there's a quick overview there. Now, political ideology in Captain Fantastic is explicit. Both sides are shown, and there are several different topics that come up that make the audience really question their own ideologies and allowing the viewer to decide. There's no clear antagonist, and ultimately, at the end, Ben compromises for the sake of his children. That's what we see there. When it comes to the applying feminist ideology, they're quite male-centric stories. So we've got Baudovan, we've got Relian, but the twin daughters and the youngest daughter aren't really given much screen time. The film is essentially surrounding male trauma, and the wife is never truly seen. Again, she's a projection of Ben's. Abigail, who is Jack's partner, a wife, is largely passive. And as I said before, the female children have less screen time. So it's all about Beau's story and Relian's kind of story as well. Applying political ideology to Shaun of the Dead, again, capitalism is shown throughout. The idea that modern UK society already has us working jobs and being very zombie-like, so it's played for laughs here. The politically right are presented as antagonists, so we have Pete, who has got his life together but is shown to be quite miserable, and then we've got Philip, his stepfather as well, which he does make amends with towards the latter part of the film. Ultimately, the army saved the day, so all Shaun really does is survive, but the army represent kind of this right-wing, kind of very forceful collective, and they're the ones that come in and save the day. At the end, Shaun is now middle class, but his life is shown to be quite boring. And again, society capitalizes on zombies for labor and for our entertainment. When you apply feminist ideology, the women are largely active, even more so than the men. So they're shown to be fighting, they have ideas, and so on. The men are quite passive. So we have Ed, who's a bit of a nuisance, and David, who becomes that kind of false hero towards the end. None of the females are sexualized or objectified. We even have Yvonne stylized as a final girl. She wears a camouflage coat throughout, or jacket. Barbara, who is considered a boomer, is largely passive, but you kind of understand given her age. But ultimately, Liz's motivation is for Shaun to commit. So we don't know beyond that what her story is. I mean, a lot of people in the class would probably have dumped Shaun in the opening scene, but she sticks with him as she needs his commitment in order to settle down. And when it comes to This Is England, it is extremely explicit as to Shane Meadows' political ideologies. He is largely anti-Thatcher, anti-war and anti-nationalist. Everyone that holds those views who is a nationalist within the narrative is either unemployed or illiterate or is shown in a negative light. Lots of anti-war messages, so we see the direct effect of Shaun's dad passing away and having an absent father. And again, right at the beginning, Thatcher is shown alongside Roland Rat. So it's using the Kuleshov effect. It is very obvious what Shane Meadows thinks of Thatcher, especially the graffiti that appears at least 4 times throughout, that Maggie is a T-word. When it comes to feminist representation, when you apply feminist theory, women are shown to be the only ones working. They are not shown to be racist, so they're racially integrated. When you see Lo walking to the factory along with South Asian women. Lo at some points is similarly dressed to the males, so she wears jeans and braces and a Harrington jacket. And we see a single working mother, Shaun's mum, And the representation is generally varied and it's quite authentic. So we also have Milky's partner as well that wants to be walked home. And we have Smell, who is sexually active and kind of has that control or that power when it comes to Shaun in that relationship as well. So the political and feminist ideology is a lot more explicit in This Is England. So to recap, number one, ideology is something that you apply to a film. Number two, ideological approaches can be political and or feminist, so it can be either or both when you are answering an exam question. Number three, ideology can be explicit or implicit. And number four, films ultimately represent the ideology of the director.